who am I that my children are going to experience right now? This alcoholic, unemployed shadow of a man, really, who just has nothing in life and has nothing to offer. So maybe they're just better off without me. And that's really how it felt. So I was about to take my own life, take the pills, drink the wine. And my phone flashed on the bedside table and I went to have a look, and it was my son, who I hadn't heard from for almost 2 years. And the text message was, "Dad, we love you and we miss you and we can't wait to see you again." It was in that moment, Nash, that you really, those emotionally impactful moments that you can have sometimes in life.
Yeah.
That was one of them.
Wow.
And for me, that was about really beginning to go, wow, who the hell have I become? And I will see my children in the future and they will see me again. And who do I want them to experience?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Thoughts on Purpose podcast. We have another incredible guest today. This gentleman, Michael Lauria, is a father, husband, the founder of Forging Excalibur, which is an incredible brand supporting men in the most phenomenal ways. Michael is an international men's coach, a podcaster, and an author, and just an amazing human being, and also a fellow Australian. So, Michael, I'm so glad you're here, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this chat.
Yes, absolutely. So am I. I love your brand, the Forging Excalibur. And you were just chatting about, how it specifically for men, like a lot of men wanted that as children. Like we love that idea of the knights and all that. And for me, I used to be obsessed about it.
So did I.
Interesting. And I think it's one of the things that drew me to your brand when you reached out as well, was that whole idea of the knights. And so I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes. I'd love to just learn a bit about you first. You've got such an extensive background. Could you just share with everyone listening a bit about your background?
Yeah, cool. Okay. So I come from an Italian family, Italian upbringing, and I grew up in Sydney in Australia, and pretty normal childhood, really. Nothing, had a great childhood, grew up in a loving family, big loving Italian family, lots of noise, lots of people, lots of cousins and aunties and uncles and whatever. And so that was pretty cool. And then as I got into teenage years, I found a sense of freedom, I guess, in friendships and life. And there's a big wide world out there, which I went out and started to explore unconsciously. And so got involved in all the normal things that, young boys do. Dabbled in, a little bit of drug use. There were, girls and drinking and all sorts of things, and lost my way a little bit, right? And then, of course, as some teenagers do, you kind of go off the path, and parents are controlling and manipulative when they're not really. Yeah, that's what you imagine, but they're not really.
Yeah.
They're just trying to keep you safe and protect you.
Yeah.
But at that point, you just want freedom and independence, and anyone that steps in the way is controlling and manipulative, and don't you dare get in my way, right? Because I'm going to live my life and you're not going to stop me. And of course, that led me to move interstate for a job opportunity, because by that time at, let's say, what was I, 20, I would say 20, I just wanted to get as far away from my parents as possible. And so I moved to Victoria, moved to Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
And started working for a company here. And that was good. It was fun. Right? Then I met the woman who would become my wife.
Wow.
And so we got married. I'm really cutting a very long story very short here.
I get that. Yeah.
Just for context, right? And so we got married, and we spent 12 years together. And we had 2 children who are now 23 and 19.
Wow.
And I want to say something about that whole experience of marriage at such a young age, because you're not even fully developed. Your brain isn't even fully developed yet until you're 25. And I was 21 when I got married and had my first child, or we had our first child when I was 23. So young to have your first child, right? And you're really not fully aware of yourself at that point. You're really not. You're really not. And so that was a really challenging thing to do. And then, of course, I fell into the trap, which just about all men do, just about all men do, of like, okay, well, it's my job to provide and protect and go out there and work. And I have to do that at the highest possible level to provide for my family and be a good husband and a good father.
Yeah.
And of course, at the expense of everything else, including myself, I
Mhm.
went out and I did that. And I did so unconsciously without any real purpose. It
Yeah.
was just really all about making money to provide for my family.
Yeah.
And of course, along the way, I lost myself. I lost my sense of self. I lost who I was as a person. I lost everything that was important. It was actually important. You and I both know that what's important is service, contribution, relationships, purpose, being a good quality individual, making a difference out there in the world. They're important things, right?
Yeah.
And really understanding what are the standards that I want to hold for myself
Yeah.
and who do I want to become and what example do I want to be in the world and who do I need to be for my children to give them the best possible experience of life as well. And I had no connection to any of that.
Mm.
So what I did is I created an experience of life where I became anxious a lot,
Mm.
depressed,
Mhm.
overweight, because then I was drinking and eating a lot as well. The marriage started to fall apart and we stayed together for 12 years and then we separated and then we got divorced. And as a result of who I was at the time, because I've been a victim of this in the past, right? But now over the last however many years it's been, you kind of look back and you go, okay, well, I need to take responsibility for this stuff. So as a result of who I was in my 20s and early 30s, I created a situation where I wasn't a very good father. And
Mm.
so as a result of all of that, didn't get to see my children after divorce for 18 months, almost 2 years at one point.
Mm.
And they were only little, they were only like 10 and 6 at the time. So that was not good.
Mm.
And that led me into a spiral of deeper anxiety, depression,
Mm.
job loss, financial struggle, which led to bankruptcy and almost eviction from the rental property that I was in as well, alcoholism. And so at one point in my life, I was unemployed. I was on a concoction of anti anxiety medication, antidepressants, alcohol, and the odd marijuana joint here and there,
Mhm.
and just trying to get through life in some way, right?
Yeah.
Living life very, very unconsciously.
Yeah.
No connection to anything deeper within myself. It was
Yeah.
all just about projection and being a victim and really not understanding the fact that in each and every moment I was creating the reality that I was experiencing.
Ooh, yeah. Massive.
And so, in that whole experience, that all led to me being drunk one Sunday morning.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting on the edge of my bed at 7 a.m. in the morning. And I tell this story a bit, but it never loses its potency to me or the people that I tell it to. But sitting there on the edge of my bed, 7 a.m. in the morning, and I've got half a bottle of wine in one hand still, and antidepressants, anti anxiety medication, and sleeping pills in the other hand. And I was about to take my own life
Wow.
because it was like I was at that point where I'm like, what is the point? I have
Mhm.
no money. I
Mhm.
have no job. I have no hope. There's no purpose in life. My children, I can't see my children. And who the hell am I anyway that I would want that my children, who am I that my children are going to experience right now?
Mm.
This alcoholic, unemployed, you know, man shadow of a man, really, who just has nothing in life and has nothing to offer. So maybe they're just better off without me. And that's really how it felt. And so I was about to take my own life, take the pills, drink the wine. And my phone flashed on the bedside table and I went to have a look and it was my son who I hadn't heard from for almost 2 years. And the text message was, Dad, we love you and we miss you and we can't wait to see you again. And it
Wow.
was it was in that moment, Nash, that you really like, those emotionally impactful moments that you can have sometimes in life.
Yeah.
That was one of them.
Wow.
And for me, that was about really beginning to go, wow, who the hell have I become? And I will see my children in the future and they will see me again. And who do I want them to experience?
Mm.
Do I want them to experience this version of me? Or do I need to put myself back together again? And so then I went on a journey over the next 12 months of basically just putting myself back together again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Brother, thank you so much for sharing. That is an incredible journey, and I can resonate with so much of your story in different ways.
Mm.
I met my wife, who I'm still with, very, very happily married, very, very grateful. We've got 3 kids together when I was 17,
You're right.
and Cassie was the same age. And we were married. I think I was married at 21, our first
Mm.
child at 23. So
Right. Very similar.
I can resonate with so much of your journey.
Mm.
But like I shared at the beginning, I guess where my experience differs, and I'm circling back, just fully respecting your story and your journey rather, was like I mentioned, at 17, I saw people who hadn't got the message,
Mm.
and who actually did take the pills, and that was tattooed on my mind. So I'm loving hearing this, because it's actually really healing for me, because seeing all that stuff in the hospitals, it confused me a lot. It did, and I had lots of questions. And so I love hearing this, even though it was so challenging for you. And I can only imagine what you experienced and where you were at, because I'm certain all along you were doing the best you could. Like, you were doing the best you knew at the time. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I was doing the best that I knew how at the time.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Um, and often people say that to me. Well, you were doing
Yeah.
the best you could at the time with what you had.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Yes, I was. Yes, I was.
Mhm.
But at some point, and I remember these points every now and then along the way,
Yeah.
I remember feeling like, or thinking, I'm better than this.
Okay.
I can do better than this.
Mm-hmm.
But then there didn't seem to be anything to connect with other than the experience that I was creating, because I felt in that moment that I was a victim of separation, divorce, financial struggle, family court, child support, all these external parts of my life that I was allowing to control my own experience and my perspective and my perception as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So it was actually that. So you've identified that, which is really amazing for people listening to this who might resonate with, where you were.
Mm.
You identified that you were letting external things control you, and you hadn't tapped into, would you call it your own power? Like, how would you word it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, all
Didn't
right.
hadn't yet tapped into my own power, my limitless potential, my what else might you say? My ability to create my own reality.
Okay. Yes.
Plus another big thing, Nash, which is at the core of what I teach people, what I teach men now, is that I had no connection with any sense of purpose for my life whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No connection to any sense of purpose. And to be honest, no desire to find anything either.
Okay.
It was just like one day, how do I get through today? How do I get through
Yeah.
today? Yep.
Okay. Wow. This is such a fascinating conversation, brother, and I'm so grateful that you were so willing to share so openly. Thank you. Thank you for being a leader. Um, I'm curious. Was it getting the message from your son that sparked your why, or was it discovering a sense of purpose? Like, what do you think goes first? Is it because I'm thinking of someone who's listening to this, they're in the same situation.
Mm.
Maybe they've heard about, you need to uncover your purpose, you need to connect with a purpose. And maybe they've tried that. Like, do you feel like that's the solution people should be focusing on, or should they be focusing on finding a why? Like, what was it for you when you?
Yeah, I think why and purpose are very deeply connected with each
Okay,
other.
all right,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I would even say they're even the same thing.
okay, yeah,
What's your why? What's your reason for being, and what's your purpose?
yeah,
I might even say they're so deeply connected that they could almost be the same thing, almost. And I might say that for me, my purpose in that moment when I received that text message from my son, it wasn't this big, expansive life purpose like I have now.
yeah,
Purpose there then was very, very basic and very fundamental. It
mm,
was like, I need to be a decent father here. I
mm,
need to be a good example for my children. And currently, I'm not.
okay,
And
all
so
right,
my why was Michael, you need to put yourself together because at some point you'll see your children again,
Mhm.
and you need to be a good example for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So it was moving beyond yourself and thinking of other people.
And what the irony was, Nash, is that even in the moment where I was contemplating taking my own life, I was still thinking of other people. And this is what many don't understand about suicide, because you know 8 men per day take their lives in Australia, right?
Wow.
Eight men per day. And I might say that 6 out of those 8 men are currently, at the time of their suicide, they're currently in the family court system. So the family court system is something that drives men towards exactly what it drove me to, right?
Wow. That's huge.
So yeah, it really is. It really is, man. It really is. And so what I might say is that what was the question again?
I'm trying to
Sorry,
remember. I'm
I
so
got
engrossed
lost.
in what you're saying. I'm so engrossed. Well, I was talking about if you could. I'm not going off notes here. I'm purely going off my heart. What I want to ask you in the moment, but um, the question was around: did you connect? Like you said at that time where you were thinking of taking your life, you were always thinking about other people.
Yeah, that was what it is. And that's
Yeah.
what people don't understand. Thanks. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So that's what people don't understand about suicide. It's that often people choose to take their own lives because they don't feel that they are the kind of person, or have the potential to be the kind of person that is good for other people, especially their children, their partner. And they feel like they're just failing at such a deep level,
Mm.
everybody that they love. And so they truly believe that these people, their children, their partner, whomever, is actually better off without them.
Oh wow.
Because look at all the chaos I'm creating in their life. Look at all the
Yeah.
trauma
Yeah.
I'm projecting. Look at all the shit I'm creating in life for
Mm.
them. And I love them so much that I don't want to do that anymore. And I don't know how else to be. And I don't know how to change. And I don't know what the steps are. And so here's a way to help them and ease them of the burden of me.
Wow. So that's a really interesting perspective. So they are very much so thinking of other people, but they're thinking from a place of, like what I'm hearing, it not being good enough in some way, shape, or form,
Absolutely.
being in the other people's
Absolutely.
lives. Okay, that's really interesting. And you, for everyone listening to this, Michael, you said how many months were you actually working on the suicide lines? Because you've had this incredible background that you've not mentioned yet. Studying human behavior, studying psychology. Can you share a
Yeah.
bit about your background and also, your work on these
Yeah. Right.
lines, you call them?
Yeah, it was Lifeline,
Your
the
lifeline.
Lifeline
Okay.
hotline. So I spent 12 years. So this was after that text message and after the next 12 months of kind of putting my life back together.
Yeah.
I suppose this leads into the next part of my life. So
Mhm.
what I chose to do, I thought, well, you know what? This is after I got a job and I got, back in control of my financial situation and seeing my children again and off the alcohol and off the antidepressants. And I kind of put my life back together again and felt like there was a sense of hope.
Okay. And
And
sorry, Michael, you were about 33, I'm guessing. If you were,
33, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes,
okay, yeah.
yes. Yeah, around there.
Yep.
And so, yep, so I got a job, um, caught up with my rent, got to see my children again, financially reasonably stable, even though I was still living kind of week to week. It was much better than where I was.
Yeah.
And so when you start to claw your way out of the depths of hell and you start to see some semblance of what you might call light,
Mm.
some of us, and this was me, kind of go, okay, cool. So that was a really shitty experience. And I imagine that lots of other men out there go through a very similar experience.
Yeah.
So I wonder, now that I am in this place where I feel reasonably centered, reasonably kind of okay, and I can manage my state reasonably well now, I wonder if I can undergo some training, do some training to then go off and help other men who are
Mm.
going through the same sort of thing.
Mhm.
And so the first step was I thought, well, okay, well, what can I do? So I went off and I got my diploma of counseling. That
Mm.
was the first thing. When I finished that, I began to facilitate men's groups. And this was men's groups specifically around divorced men, divorced fathers, right? And
Mm.
so I started facilitating them, and that evolved into one on one counseling. And I started figuring out pretty quickly after a few months that the counseling thing was kind of good for men to, and for people to get a lot of stuff off their chest and kind of feel like there's something else for them aside from their experience that
Yes.
they're having. But beyond that, it wasn't really creating any kind of transformation.
Hmm.
And so I thought, I wonder what's going on here. There must be deeper levels than counseling. This was me back in the day, right? And of course, there's deeper levels, but I just didn't know it back then.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, cool. What's some other things that I can learn? And so then I went on a journey and I studied psychology. This is over the next few years, studied psychology, neuroscience, neuropsychology, relationship psychology, et cetera, et cetera. And then coaching as well. And I created this blend of all these different types of modalities and created my own, I guess, approach, if you like, over the next few years,
Mhm.
which has been highly successful. And when I say successful, not from a business perspective, but it actually helps people, helps men transform their lives in such a way that they can go from where I was, for instance, sitting on the edge of my bed with a bottle of wine,
Yeah.
to creating some purpose, meaning, and fulfillment in life, having good quality relationships, um, feeling like their life means something to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love also the vehicle you've chosen for it in the form of the brand you've created.
Mm.
Um, I think I'm thinking of when I was a young lad, and an obsession for medieval. Like I
Oh,
can't
me
tell
too.
you, it
Still
was
do, man.
yeah, it's phenomenal. Such an incredible time. Like I would make the actual chainmail. I was like the bows, the swords, the forges, making
Yeah, cool.
yeah, like I was obsessed, real nerd. Um, so I'm thinking back to that, and when I think of myself within that, I felt so powerful
Mm.
as a kid. Like I
Yep.
felt so powerful, and what I'm sensing you're doing on such a high level, Michael, is you are supporting men return to that power they knew they had potentially as children,
Mm.
um, and it's always been within them,
Yep.
and you are just reconnecting them with that. Does that resonate?
Yeah, it does to a certain degree. It
Yeah.
certainly does. I mean, as boys, we pick up play swords and play knights and whatever else we do with that. But
Yeah.
there's an unbound, uncontrolled sort of aggressive energy to all of that as well, if we think about it.
True.
And that's just boys playing, and
Yeah.
there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But then as we grow up and we become young adults and then move into adulthood, if we don't start to bring some consciousness to that, it can be unbound,
Mhm.
absolutely unbound, and
Beautiful.
create horrible results in our lives for ourselves and the people around us.
Mhm.
And so what I'm doing with Forging Excalibur, and I'm happy to speak to you about how that brand came into being and for
Yeah.
what purpose. But what I'm doing with Forging Excalibur and going, is, what? It's not just about not becoming a knight.
Yeah.
It's, even though it is,
Yeah.
and it's not just about war and battle and, forging a sword and all that sort of stuff, even though it is, and that's all very cool stuff. We go back to, what kind of virtuous attributes did these men on their journey towards knights have to develop?
Mm.
Who did they have to become in order
Mm.
to be knighted? And it wasn't just all about how well you could use a sword and how well you could shield yourself and how well you could fight in battle. The
True.
majority of a knight's time was spent in service and
Mm.
contribution to the kingdom. And there was a code of honor, and there was loyalty, and there was honor, and there was compassion, and there was discernment, and there was integrity, and there was responsibility, and there was also courage, and there was also strength. And in each and every moment, they self actualized themselves,
Mm.
right? And all of those words that I just used are all what I call the seven standards of men,
Mm.
which I have included in my book, Forging Excalibur.
Wow.
And these are the standards that I believe all men should hold themselves to, these virtuous attributes and standards and values that all men should hold themselves to in order to be the best quality men that they can be and be
Mm.
the most engaged, connected partner, be the most connected, engaged fathers, be a good role model for their children, actually go out there and step into service and contribution, have some purpose and meaning to life so that when we get to the end of life, it's like That was a life well lived. I helped other people, and I made the world a better place for the fact that I was here.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. Could you list those? Did you call them attributes? 7 attributes?
Seven standards of men. Yep. So
7
they're
standards.
integrity,
Mhm.
strength, courage, purpose, self-actualization, and compassion.
Mm. Wow. I love those. That's phenomenal. And there's so much, like we could just, I'd love to dissect that with you, but
Yeah, go for it.
like, so what does it mean to be, because I think I know, but I want to hear what your take is on this, because you've supported a lot of men specifically. To be a courageous man,
Mm.
what does that actually mean?
Courage is basically the overcoming of fear. So
Mhm.
we all have fear, and there's no point denying the fact that there is fear that
Mhm.
exists within us. And what we have to understand about fear is that it's usually an irrational fear, and it's usually a fear of being seen, or it's a fear of not being good enough, or it's a fear of not achieving the thing that we set out to do, or it's a fear of not being a good person, or it's a fear of failure or success. And what we have to understand is that most fear is mostly has no foundations to it.
Mm.
And it's interesting that you ask about that because it is the courage to overcome fear and then the strength to do what is right,
Love that. Yeah, that's
regardless of the
yeah,
circumstances.
yeah. I love that so much. I'm excited that someone like yourself is out there doing this work. My wife and I, Cassie and I, have we've got a son and 2 daughters, and I'm really excited that someone like yourself is out there educating men, and even the book you've created. I'm really curious to check out your book. I'd love to check it out.
I just
And
happen to have a copy
oh,
right here.
oh, amazing! Look at that! Look at that!
There it is.
I love the cover too. That's phenomenal. Yeah, I'm excited. Do you feel like that's a book that I could read with my son, or it's more like a father?
How
uh,
old is your son?
7.
7.
Mm.
Yeah, probably not for a 7-year-old.
Okay.
However, you could read it and then
Yeah,
you could pass on some of the key points to him in language that a 7-year-old can understand.
I love that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Even just those, the 7 pillars, like having those as a compass for him and gently explain each one. I think that's so
Absolutely.
valuable. And for anyone listening, maybe uh, maybe you've got a son, maybe you've got a nephew, maybe you've got a brother, whatever it is, like just writing the 7 pillars Michael's just shared,
Mm.
and having them as some sort of a compass, your North Star, I think,
Yep.
and exploring them and asking yourself, what do these mean to me? And look at other people who might have those attributes, and yeah, just finding ways to integrate them into your life. I love that. And I can just in itself, like a man who might have felt very purposeless, just having those in his space, it gives hope straight away,
Oh,
because
absolutely. And they're anchors, Nash. They're just
anchors.
anchors.
That's right.
They're anchors. You can always come back to them. And I
Yeah.
created them, I spent a lot of time and reflection just sort of going, what will these standards be? Right. And when you think about them in isolation, you actually need the other 6 in order to embody the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're all interconnected. So one of them is responsibility, right? 100% ultimate responsibility. It's like when you think about that for a second and you go deep into that concept of responsibility, and we understand that as a society, we're conditioned to externalize everything and blame and find fault and actually not hold ourselves accountable and not adopt 100% responsibility. You kind of go, what does it take in 2021, right, for a man to take 100% ultimate responsibility? Well, you have to have the courage to look at yourself. You got to have the strength to be honest about yourself. You have to be able to step into a sense of integrity in that honesty and courage to be able to go, okay, cool. Well, in order for me to be a man of integrity, I need to take responsibility. And then, of course, you've got to have self compassion for the fact that you don't need to berate yourself for who you used to be, but be focused on who you can become, right?
Yes.
And the journey that you're on. And of
Yes.
course, when we take responsibility in each and every moment for every thought, feeling, and action, then we are self-actualizing in each and every moment as well.
Mhm.
So they're all interconnected and they're so important, and they really can be the anchors that we go back to every day. Am I living my life according to the 7 standards of men? And
Yeah.
if the answer is yes, that's awesome. But there's always deeper levels. You can always be a man of integrity even deeper. You can always adopt more responsibility. You can always self-actualize even more in each moment. You can always have more compassion for yourself and others.
Yeah. I love that. And within that, like within those next levels of growth, like there's like that's a beautiful opportunity. It's the beauty of being a human. Like there are always other levels, no matter how much work we've done, no matter how masterful we think we are.
Mm,
And that in and of itself is a trap that a lot of people get stuck in. They're like, I've tried all this stuff, but it's not like that. You've got to continue to live it. You can never stop getting benefits from this stuff. Like I can
totally.
imagine.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
I love the work you're doing, brother. It's so refreshing to hear. Everything you're doing, and I'm really blessed. Everyone who comes on the podcast is out there doing incredible work and in their own way. And I love the way that you've taken your experiences and you've turned the tides to create something that's having a phenomenal impact. I think that is just it's the opportunity that everyone has who's listening to this, who is going through some time where you might feel completely lost, where you might not know your purpose. Like Michael's example, it can be a demonstration of what's possible. And you can look at Michael and look at you now, like you've got this phenomenal brand, you're supporting people. I'm assuming all around the world, not just in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and like you've done all this, and you were literally on the end of your bed, handful of pills, bottle of wine, ready to end it all, but
Mhm.
you found it within yourself to keep moving forward, and you've created this incredible life. Could you talk to me a little bit about the people who feel that they don't have purpose right now, Michael? Who are they can sort of feel like maybe they've had good momentum, they've done stuff, but they feel exactly like you said you were there providing for your family, you thought you were doing the right things, being a responsible man. I was 1,000%. Again, I said I could resonate with the story. I was exactly that in my carpentry business, working ridiculous hours, not seeing my wife. She was almost hoping I'd lose my job, even though I ran my own construction business, but she was kind of hoping it would all fall apart just so she could see me. And I couldn't believe it when she said that.
Yeah.
I was like, what? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But that was true because she could see who I was becoming and disconnected and so caught up in it. For someone who's in that and they can sort of feel like things are falling apart, what would you say to them so they don't get to the point that maybe you got to or maybe I got to? How do they turn the tides?
Well, I would say one of the very first steps, and I don't necessarily want to promote my stuff here, but I do want to say that one of the first steps that we do in the hero's journey. So I've got a few pathways that people can do. So it starts with the Knight's Code, and then we go into the hero's journey. Right. In the hero's journey, one of the first modules is core values, and when you're in a place where where you feel a little bit empty,
Yeah.
and you feel like life is chaotic, and you don't really have those anchors
Yeah.
to go back to make good quality choices about how you spend your time and where your focus is in life. It is so very important for everyone, man or woman, to develop a really deep sense of connection with your core values. Like, what do you value at the deepest possible level that are immutable, immovable, anchoring, that you can always come back to make a good quality choice in life? And
Yes.
that is around how you spend your time, where your priorities are. And if you were to lose your job and lose your money and lose your house and lose your car and lose all the stuff, but you still had your family, right? Is that what you truly value, right? Or do you value the money and the job and the car and the house and all the bits and pieces and stuff, right? And so when we start to get clear on that sort of stuff, we start to really begin to make good quality choices around everything in life. And so the very first month of the second month of the hero's journey is around what are your core values? Not values like love and integrity and family and all the fluffy stuff. It's like, what are these real anchoring, solid things that you can always come back to no matter what's happening around you?
Yeah.
You can always come back to, and give yourself that center, that anchor to make good quality choices around everything in life. And then we move into, what is your well-defined purpose? Like, what is that real well-defined thing that you want to spend your life creating or working towards, so that you can self-actualize and step into your brilliance and bring your greatness to the world?
Mhm.
And then self-image, like, who do you need to become in order to do that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. That, yeah.
Whilst embodying the 7 standards of men in each and every moment.
Yeah. I love that. It's so powerful. And exactly what you said, connecting with those core values. When I think back to when I was in that situation, I was just smashing myself with work, and then I would drink copious amounts of alcohol, overeat, play
Mm.
video games.
It's
I
all avoidance, isn't it? It's all
It really
avoidance.
is.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
absolutely right. Like, thinking back then, had I connected, had I had someone to like just support me connecting to what was true to me,
Mm.
like that footing would have been priceless. Like, I can't even remember who I thought I was. I just felt like I was in a no man's land,
Yeah.
just going through the motions. And I know I'm not the only person. I'm sure there's people listening to this who are in a similar position. So I love that you do that. I love that you connect people to those core values. And I think that's just, for anyone listening, that's an opportunity you have right now to sit down and connect to your truth. Very, very powerful, Michael. Do you believe that everyone on earth, like, you've had so many conversations, you've done so much work, so much training, and you're obviously an incredible student of life as well. Do you believe everyone on earth has a purpose, Michael?
It might sound really cliche, but I think we were all put here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And what that reason is, I think we have a duty to find out what that reason is.
Yeah. Mm. I
Yeah.
love that. I totally agree. Thank you for sharing that.
And then move towards it.
Yeah.
And really, at our core, we are kind, selfless sources of energy having a human experience. And so, and we're all connected. And so we all play a part in each other's experience here on earth as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we should all find out what piece of the puzzle we're supposed to be in that collective experience right now.
Ooh, I love
And
that.
that's purpose.
I love that. Uh,
It's almost like, if you imagine we're all part of one big tapestry,
yeah.
right? We're all part of one big tapestry. And
Yeah.
our job, and we are one bit of thread in
Mm.
that tapestry. And it's our job to find out where the hell we belong up on that
Yeah.
tapestry.
Amazing. And connecting with your core values is a key part of that. Like, once you connect with those core values, you can build from there. You can,
Once you connect with core values, you know what you truly value, you
yeah.
know what is at your absolute core. And from core values, you can then make good quality choices around everything in life. And
Yeah.
then the purpose piece is a separate piece. Where it's
Uh-huh.
like, oh, I got my core values, now I got my well-defined purpose. So I know who I need to be and what I truly value. And now I know the direction that I'm heading in as well, which gives my life meaning, and I feel fulfilled because I'm doing something of service and contribution to others.
I love that, Michael. Thank you for sharing. I'm curious, what's a conversation that you would love to have with more people that maybe you think about a lot, that you might not have as much as you want? Is there something, like a topic where you're like, I love talking about this thing? I don't often talk about it though.
Yeah, probably consciousness and the state and the just the whole mystery around consciousness, collective consciousness, and that this real illusion of individuality that we all have, that we're all these silos and we're all individuals and we're not connected. And and I think people, especially in the world these days, I think if more people understood the value of that real energetic connection that we all have with each other, and I think we would live in a much different world.
Wow, that's huge. So how could people, like, I'm thinking how we can make that.
There's so many conversations I would love to have, Nash. That's just one
Yeah,
of them.
I get that. I get that. So let's just explore that one a little bit. Again, I'm always mindful to make applicable for everyone listening. So we're not individual, we are all connected. And that's phenomenal when we actually get that. I understand exactly what you mean. For someone who might be hearing that idea for the first time, or for someone who might not be, and for myself as well, like I'm curious, how do I do more of that? What would you say to anyone to do to feel more connected and to work within that more effectively?
Yeah. So the very first thing is what Socrates said: know thyself. Right? Know thyself. It's actually a very simple starting point. Know thyself. Like, who are you? Who are you? And and who do you have the potential to become? And how can you self actualize in each and every moment? I keep on coming back to these words because these are the standards we should all be living by. One is taking responsibility for knowing thyself, self actualizing in each moment. And when we do that, we step into a depth of connection with the self and then a projection of kindness and love towards others, service and contribution that creates unity and connection. And when more of us do that, we will, by natural consequence and evolution, find that connection with each other.
Love that. I've spoken to people before who think that, you know, maybe they've been very much so focused on themselves all their life, and then you begin to encourage them to focus on contribution. And sometimes people feel that by moving into contribution, they're going to miss out. They're going to forget about themselves somehow. But
Oh no, absolutely not.
yeah,
Absolutely
absolutely.
not. In fact, a key component of contribution, and not just contribution, but sustained contribution over time, is self-care and looking after yourself and loving yourself and having self-compassion.
Yeah,
Because it's the old adage, right? It's the old saying, if you don't fill your own cup, you can't fill anyone else's.
true.
So you look after yourself first and you develop a sense of self-awareness and a connection with self. And then what happens is your external world benefits from that.
Mhm.
The external world benefits from that. So first you contribute and be of service to yourself, but there's also that line between doing that and being selfish as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How would someone know when they're being selfish? I get that's a broad question, but in your experience, like where might someone be too self-centered or self-focused, whichever way you want to word it, and how would they know? Like,
I think
what
you
kind of
start to figure
feedback?
it out. I think you start to figure it out pretty quickly when your when your validation and approval comes from outside of yourself.
The validation approval comes from outside. All
Yeah.
right.
So when you seek validation and approval from others, and
Yeah.
that could be your partner, friends, social media, whatever it might be, when you seek validation externally,
Yeah.
and when you're motivated by money and material possessions,
Mhm.
then you will find that you've probably stepped into territory that is not conducive with contribution.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, that's very good. Very good indeed. What else would be a conversation that you'd love to have? Like, this is a I was actually interviewed someone else earlier today, and I was just
Mm.
explaining, like, very much so through my podcast, I'm about supporting people connect with different ways of thinking, like really expanding people's awareness and perceptions of what's available to them to create an epic life. So
Mm.
what's another topic that maybe you don't talk about as much? Because I also appreciate when you're in a coaching and an educating role, sometimes, you know, you're operating within your frameworks and different bits and pieces, but sometimes it's nice just to have a platform to flow.
Yeah,
Uh,
cool, man. Okay.
and if there's something like that where you just want to jam out, like, I'd love to go there with you.
I might say that one big thing that I've noticed with people in general, and the constructed way that we live life, is that I enjoy having conversations around perspective and perception and projection, the three P's, right? Perspective, perception, and projection.
Yeah.
Understanding that everything that we experience internally and externally is a projection, perception, or a perspective, or a combination of all three. And when we start to understand that, we understand that reality can ebb and flow. Our experience of reality can ebb and flow based on those three factors, which means that reality is highly subjective, depending upon the observation of the individual in that moment and their unconscious projections, perceptions, and perspectives.
Yeah. Wow. That is very, very good. I love that. Perceptions, projections, and perspective.
Perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about projections, because I know that like that's one thing that I hear a lot about, and I totally agree with. I think people, if they've listened to the podcast for a while, they'll get, perceptions and perspectives.
Mm.
Talk to me about projections. I don't think any of my guests have ever really moved into projections. Like,
Okay, cool.
what do you mean by projection, and how, like, are we ever, like, should we try and stop projecting it? Like, how do we operate within that?
Yeah, I think it depends upon the projection. I think if they are shadow projections, that's
Okay.
something that we should try and integrate, definitely.
Okay.
And this is some of the stuff that I teach. So for context within that, Carl Jung talked about the shadow, right? Carl Jung is a psychologist from like 100 years ago,
Yeah.
and he talked about the shadow, which is essentially the unconscious mind, and that is all the parts of us that we seek to avoid, suppress, and deny, all the parts of us that we don't want to admit to, that we don't want to show the world and hardly even admit to ourselves, right? The
Yeah.
dark parts of us. And
Yeah.
so, what happens when we don't integrate the shadow is the shadow will rule our lives. It's the unconscious mind.
Mm.
So it will direct our thoughts, it will direct our words, it will direct our actions, our behaviors, and create results that are undesirable and unconscious until we become aware of what is in the unconscious mind, what is contained within the shadow.
Yeah.
And so a projection of the shadow is something that we are seeking to avoid about ourselves, that we notice in others, and then we might berate them or criticize them for that, when really it's a criticism of our own, the parts of us that we seek to avoid.
Mm.
And so the way that we integrate projections and the way that we understand what our projections are is we seek to understand ourselves, and we seek to understand and just be honest with ourselves. Like, what am I avoiding about myself? What am I not prepared to look at? What do I get annoyed, frustrated, and angry with about other people and within other people? And how is that a projection of my own avoidance and my own denial?
Yeah.
So when we start to take responsibility at a depth like that, we tend to stop finding fault and laying blame with others, accepting more responsibility for how we're showing up and our own projections, and then beginning to learn how to integrate them into our psyche. And what it means when you integrate a shadow projection is you become aware of it. It's like, okay, well, I have this awareness, and I can acknowledge that when somebody speaks about that particular thing or has that look on their face or whatever it might be, that I take that personally. Why
Mm.
do I take that personally? And it's different for everybody. But
Yeah.
as soon as you bring awareness to that, then it's not a projection anymore. Because what might happen is, in an intimate relationship, for instance, you might initiate sex with your partner, for instance, and
Mm.
he or she might say, no, not today. And you go, oh, what's wrong with me? And it's not, what have I done wrong this time? And all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, right? And it's like, maybe it's got nothing to do with you. Maybe the way that you're feeling is a projection of your own sense of self-worth, your
Mhm.
own feelings of inadequacy, your own insecurities. And maybe if you begin to acknowledge and become aware of what they are, then you instigate sex with your partner and he or she says, no, not now. And it's like, cool,
Mm. Yep.
no worries. That's
Yep.
integration of, but you can still observe the unconscious reaction that comes up within you, right?
Yeah.
The energy that comes forth, and you go, yep, I get that. I understand what that is. And it kind of can dissipate there without being projected upon my partner or the people that I love.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for having that conversation. I'm just gonna attack something on that, and I'm curious what your perspective. And this is just me having a conversation that I'm really curious
Yeah.
about. Really, um, where people have started doing work on themselves, and they've started doing some bit of integration, but then they see someone else, like maybe say for example, I'm thinking of someone in a relationship. They've started doing the work on themselves, and then they see that their partner's not doing it,
Mhm.
and
Good
then
question, this one.
and then they start kind of judging the partner, and they're like, oh, it's not my stuff now, it's the partner's stuff.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? They kind of
Absolutely.
get caught in this little trap,
Yep.
versus it's always a projection, isn't it?
It's even that is a projection,
Yeah.
because who are we to judge somebody else's journey?
Yeah.
And even if they're our partner, like, just because we choose to go on a journey of self-discovery, that doesn't obligate them to go on a journey of self-discovery at the same time.
True.
That might not be their time right now.
Yeah.
And unconditional love says, I accept you for who you are.
Mm.
And not that I'm going to tolerate abuse or bad behavior or your own projections. However, I can love you for who you are and whatever stage of the journey you're at,
Yeah.
understanding that I'm going on my journey now too.
Yeah.
And this is part of my journey.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for speaking into that. That's huge. Amazing.
It's a big question, Nash, because then people say, well, if I'm working on myself and he or she is not, and I'm beginning to understand that who I surround myself with is important for my experience of life and who I become as a person, it starts to open Pandora's box. And
It
so
does.
it really does. It really
Yeah.
does. So, and if we seek for other people to change, we first have to lead by changing ourselves. And then if that person follows, well and good. If they choose not to, that's their choice.
Yeah. Yeah. 1,000%. Beautifully answered, mate. Um, I've got one more question for you, because I
Go
want
for it.
to fill your time.
It's all good.
But before I ask the last question, where can people connect with you, find out more about your work, buy your book? How do people get around everything you do?
Yeah, thank you, man. Forgingexcalibur.com.
Yes.
That's the website. I have a Facebook group for men called Creating Nights from Men.
Mm.
And yeah, everything can be found either in that group or on the website.
Fantastic. And wherever you're watching this, listening to this, we'll have links below. Excellent, Michael. So the question I ask all of my guests is, imagine that for 1 minute, you had access to the back end of Facebook, Instagram, all the biggest platforms like YouTube.
So many changes, Nash.
Yeah, so many changes. But what I would love for you to do is, like, imagine that billions of people would see a message before these social media platforms disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
That would probably be a good thing in some ways. But I'm curious, like, if you had 1 minute just to get a message out there, to speak into people's hearts, what would you say?
I would say, remember who you are, be kind, understand that you have limitless potential, and work towards bringing your limitless potential to life and self-actualizing in each moment.
Mm.
That's the best I can come up with in 30 seconds.
That's absolutely perfect. That's absolutely
Yep.
perfect. I love that. I love that. And yeah, I love that. I love that term self-actualization that you're using. I think that's just, people could just sit with that, or journal about that, and really
I
dissect.
encourage people to sit with that and journal about it. I also encourage them to implement that in their lives.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Because here's the thing with self-actualization, Nash, when we self-actualize
Yeah.
in each and every moment internally, like even from our very thoughts, that's where it all starts. When we self-actualize our thoughts, our results are self-actualized as a natural consequence of that. And so we self-actualize in each moment. So self-actualization, for those people who are watching or listening, what that really is understanding what your potential is, having a clear vision of your potential, and then working towards it in each and every moment, fearlessly and unapologetically in each and every moment. and becoming the best you can be and being the best you can be in each and every moment.
Yeah.
That's self-actualizing. And if
Cool.
everybody did that in the world, in fact, that's probably the message I want to put on social media.
Yeah. That's
Is that
perfect.
what
Yeah.
it's Yeah,
That's perfect. I love that message. Or both of the messages. We've got two for the price of one. So thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thanks for the way you show up, and thank you for the courage you have. And I'm so grateful that life called you forward for more. And not only did it call you forward, because I think it's always calling us forward, but you listened and you had the bravery to listen. And you've followed your heart and gone on to, do the amazing work you're doing now. And I know in many ways, I sense that you're just getting started.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what, Nash, we all have the potential to do anything, really.
Yeah.
We have limitless potential. And if one more quick thing I just want to say is that throughout life, we all get presented with a call to adventure.
Yeah.
And most people reject the call to adventure over and over again until they've lost everything. Think about Luke Skywalker. He didn't accept his call to adventure until he lost everything, and he had no other choice and nowhere else to go. And so he went off with Obi-Wan Kenobi to fight the dark side of the Force, right?
Yeah.
And so most people don't accept their call to adventure until they've lost everything. Accept their call to adventure, go on the hero's journey, and find the Holy Grail. And what I encourage people to do is don't wait until you've lost everything before you accept your call to adventure. Understand that you have limitless potential and you have a purpose in this world, and you need to be living a life of service and contribution to others. So accept your call to adventure whilst you still have everything that you truly value. Go on your hero's journey and make a dent in the universe.
Michael, thank you so much for your time, brother. Appreciate
You're
you.
a legend, Nash. Thank you.
Good on you, mate.